Welcome to the Critical Thinking Strategy for Unit 2. The strategy for this unit is comparing and contrasting. We look for similarities and differences all the time. For example, look at the two jobs. How are they the same? How are they different? In academic assignments, you're often asked to compare and contrast things such as environments, historic periods, methods, governments, styles of writing, costs. Comparing and contrasting goes beyond just listing details and examples. This student discusses each company separately and does not analyze the similarities and differences. His grade reflects the lack of analysis. As a critical thinking strategy, comparing and contrasting shows that you understand the points well enough to analyze the details and find the relationships between them. This student was able to examine the similarities and differences between the two companies, and is rewarded for it. To compare and contrast means to read or listen carefully to the details and to compare or find similarities, to contrast or find differences, to analyze the similarities and differences and find relationships. Important note, to compare and contrast does not mean to judge whether one theory, product, or method is better than the other unless you're specifically asked to do so. In order to compare and contrast items, first list the details. Here are two companies. Company A is a travel startup with 5,000 employees and offices around the world. The job pays $35,000 a year with full responsibility for one project. Company B is a startup tech company with 5,000 employees in one office in London. The job pays $30,000 a year for working on group projects. But critical thinking is not just about listing the separate details. The next step is to compare and contrast them. Ask yourself, what are the similarities? What are the differences? And what are the relationships between them? To compare and contrast, speakers and writers use some of these expressions. Some comparison signals are similar to, like, similarly, in the same way, as, both. Some signals used to contrast are however, but, unlike, in contrast, conversely, on one hand, on the other hand, and although. Here are some comparative structures: bigger than, harder than, more expensive than, less productive than. Read this successful comparison of Company A and Company B. Notice the underlined expressions. Now let's practice. Look at the pictures. Compare and contrast these two jobs. How are they similar? What makes them different? Pause to think about these questions. Try to write at least 5 points of comparison and contrast. Use a Venn diagram. Here's a hint. Did you think about the kind of job The location? The weather? The clothing? Does your diagram look something like this? The jobs are similar in that both people are scientists. One job takes place outdoors while the other is indoors. The scientist in the lab wears a light lab coat, unlike the scientist outdoors who's wearing clothes for the wet weather. Both jobs could be dangerous, but the job along the river seems more dangerous. Here's another one. Compare and contrast these two wilderness adventures. What elements would you compare and contrast? Pause to think about these questions. Try to write at least 5 points of comparison and contrast. Did you think about the environment, the climate, the type of animals encountered, the cost, the special equipment necessary? Here's one idea. Last one. Compare and contrast your English class and a math class. In what ways are they similar? In what ways are they different? Are there any relationships between them? Pause to think about where you would put the ideas in the box. Does your diagram look something like this? Let's recap today's lesson. Comparing and contrasting is a critical thinking strategy that requires looking at information and thinking about relationships. Ask yourself, what are the similarities? What are the differences? What are the relationships? What words signal comparisons or contrasts? Did I use these expressions in my explanation? Thank you for listening.